What's that?
Is already Corey and Mark not coming?
I think Mark's on the parking lot talking to Kevin now.
Oh,
But I hadn't heard anything from Corey. Getting everybody in there, Chief?
Trying. Also trying not to make it so somebody walks out of the gym and smushes it.
Yeah, text if you want. See anyone down there? Otherwise, I can go make a copy real quick. I took mine with me. So. That's fine. I can make a copy. Hey.
Alright,
Is public allowed to come? I had someone out there asking me. That's why it's on. Was that the conference? So that's why it's on. Okay.
alright, it's calling for deputy take roll call, please.
Slade,
President?
Cody,
Yep.
Corey, Mark,
Yes.
Kyle,
Yes. We need a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Motion by Cody, second by Slade. You don't know if Kevin had any conditions or amendments or anything? All right, then, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, new business. We have.
Hey, good.
Dr. Dees, the Chief Medical Director of Freeman Regional Health
And
Services.
he was just grabbing something quick off the printer, so we'll be back.
Awesome. We heard you were swearing last meeting, Shane, wanted to catch it in the tape this time.
I did.
No, I do.
I did have to work on a little bit of copy for 4 months at home and not be in
Yeah.
school. When I come back in August, or just got to
That's the
tried to give them school, they just got to give it.
Remind me of a picture to show you on the wall, that's Cody. After the meeting.
Sorry, I'm gonna pull a plug on those so people can actually hear what we're saying.
Sounds good. We approved the agenda.
Okay.
And then now you.
Sorry about that. So, I had a chance to talk with Dr. Feast a little bit the other day, and I know last week when we had our regular board meeting, there were some questions that came up a little bit in terms of kind of what we were doing, why we were doing it, some of that stuff, and we tried to explain it as best we could, and we have been working with quite a few people from over at the hospital, but thought maybe it would be helpful to have him here to kind of give his side of things and his thoughts and maybe answer some of your questions that you have. And then obviously, the primary reason we wanted to have the meeting is because we, as a part of our other plan that we kind of went through last month, we didn't address the entire athletic spectator side of things for home games. So we had some time to look at that, put that together. So With that said, I'll kind of turn it over to Dr. Afis here, and he'll kind of give you some information here, and then we'll kind of have some time for some questions if we have some.
Thank you all for allowing me to be here. If I understand correctly, I guess one of the main purposes for me to be here was just to be available to answer questions and to confirm, what is the medical side of things, what is the medical approach, what is the attitude that we're taking at the local medical facility here, which also represents kind of the larger healthcare systems in Sioux Falls, and some of the discussions that we have within our team, our incident command, and things like that. So I wanted to thank you guys for allowing me to be here. This is definitely an unprecedented time. This is definitely new, and in some ways, if it's appropriate for me to say this, it's actually exciting, because I imagine that when my kids grow up, I can tell them that we went through this time, and it was not like anything else that we've ever had to deal with. And all of us are in this together. In order for all of us to succeed, we really have to work together, and we're all on the same team. And if there's anything that I can do, or the medical facility, if there's anything that we can do at any time at all, we're always happy to be available. We're happy to do whatever is ever needed. We're just waiting, for people to express any interest at all. One of the things within our meetings, some of the other doctors, they're saying that, how much are we gonna try to volunteer ourselves in the community, because they're getting a lot of feedback that people are kind of sick and tired, and they're annoyed and frustrated, and they almost don't want to hear anymore. So I don't know what the right answer is. Now, when COVID-19 first came on the scene, and if you look at if you remember early on, March, April, South Dakota didn't have any cases, and then all of a sudden we had 5 cases, and then things like that. And there are a lot of factors that kind of skewed the data. One is the testing availability. The other is who met criteria for testing. 3 is having symptoms but not identifying that this could potentially be COVID-19 symptoms. So the truth is, we don't know exactly how it played out. We don't know if people already had it and they're fine. We don't know if people didn't have it and they're still at risk for getting it. We just don't know. We just don't know, and I don't think we'll ever know the true statistics. But when COVID-19 first came on the scene, and we all kind of shut down, we all halted, especially our clinic and the hospital and all the other hospitals, and we were partnered with Avera now, so we were part of their town hall meetings, and we're hearing stories from our colleagues in Minnesota, our colleagues in Michigan, and when you hear the way the people who actually went through it, the hospitalists, when COVID came, and they didn't know it was COVID at that time, all of a sudden people are becoming critically ill. And the way they described it, one of the hospitalists, they said that it was like the apocalypse. Like just every 10, 15 minutes, they're calling code blue, such and such room, code blue, so, and then there's just not enough anesthesiologists to go around in the hospitals to quickly run and quickly save all these, people who are critically ill. And no one had an idea what's going on. All of a sudden, people are just, their oxygens are dropping. And I just remember, hearing that description, that as she was going through it, the word that she used to describe the scene at the hospital it was like the apocalypse. We've been very, very, very fortunate in South Dakota that we did not experience a surge of that magnitude. And ever since then, we are all of us, we're just holding our breath. All of us doctors, we're holding our breath. We changed so many things. We changed the ventilation systems in our hospital to be able to manage, like, okay, what will happen if so many people come? what will happen if we run out of oxygen here? What will we happen here? So that is the attitude that we have as the medical providers regarding COVID-19. And honestly, all of us are shocked. We are shocked that it hasn't come yet, that the whole surge, the tidal wave, hasn't come. And what we're sensing within the community and within the state, is only so long that people can be on high alert. And after a while, people get frustrated, and even myself, there's only so long you can hold that kind of vigilance. And now things are happening, or rather more and more events are happening. We have larger gatherings happening outdoors, and then the concept of the PPE, the masks, and the social distancing. These things are becoming a little bit less encouraged, or not encouraged as intensely as it used to be. And all of us, we're just holding our breaths. And my attitude, and I think this is also the view of the other doctors too, is that once it happens and we become overrun, then we don't know how many people will die. We don't know how the system will get stressed, and that is what we're just we're kind of keeping a close eye on. And as long as it hasn't happened yet, we still have breathing room. And we don't know how it'll play out. We don't know if it'll continue to be this low-grade smoldering thing where sometimes it goes a little bit high and then it goes down and overall stays stable, or maybe it just goes away altogether, or maybe the prairie fire comes and everything crashes and burns all at once, and then it'll be over. We don't know. I don't know, and I also don't want to find out. And that is our attitude, and what we're encouraging to people, to anyone who will listen at this point, is it's not over till it's over. The fact that it hasn't come, the fact that we haven't all crashed and burned, this is very, very fortunate. This is very fortunate, and let's try to do what we can to maintain this good position, where we still have some degree of control, where our facility still has resources to manage whatever volume that we can, that the facilities in Sioux Falls and Yankton and even further, Rochester, Omaha, Mitchell, that we're not overrun. So that's what we like to keep it there. Now, what can we do to kind of keep it there? There are three things that we've kind of distilled it down to. One is wearing the masks. And there are so many arguments on both sides of the camp. There are a lot of people who try to rationalize that, oh no, if you look at the particle of the coronavirus 19, it's such and such microns long, and then you need a 3M rated filtration in order, and if you're using these cloth masks and it doesn't filter and this and that. I've heard both sides of the camp. My personal approach, and this is an approach that I use in medicine, and this is an approach I teach medical students, don't be too smart. Just simple things, just cover all your bases. You never say never in medicine. You never use this concept of, oh, there's no way this chest pain can be a heart attack because they're only this age, or don't be too smart. Cover basics. It's a simple intervention. The data that we use, in 1918 there was a Spanish flu, and they started using some type of face coverings, and then there was I want to say it was the 1918 Spanish flu. It may have been another pandemic at that time. But they used the face covering, and they were able to statistically show, the cases dropping off. And they didn't have a 3M rated, the 2 to 5 micron mask, at that time. They just had, simple cloth masks at that time. Also, the mask, it also reminds us not to, touch our face or touch our eyes, or it's just like a physical barrier there. once again, there will be arguments on both sides of camp. Well, if you're not wearing it properly, then, you know, people will fidget with it, you know, more so, kids will fidget with it. What's the point of doing it? Once again, my attitude is, you know, don't try to over rationalize. You know, you can solve a lot of problems by doing, at least my experience in medicine, you could solve a lot of problems by just covering bases. You know, you don't have to be the top neurosurgeon to know, to cover simple bases, and that'll save you a lot of trouble down the road. So one of the things is, you know, the masking. The other thing is the distance. So we know that this coronavirus is it's a respiratory virus, and it's the way that it's spread is by a transmission we call droplet transmission, which is different from airborne. Airborne is kind of like tuberculosis, where you need, you know, multiple layers and you really can't be potent. For coronavirus, you know, we've picked the number 6 feet, and that seems to be a pretty good number. That if you're more than 6 feet apart, then you're pretty well covered from a distance standpoint. And the third component is going to be well, there's the hand sanitizing and the hand washing and good hand hygiene. But the third component will be the time you spend. So let's say you're within 6 feet, but if you're there for just 30 seconds, then that's not so bad, versus if you're there for 30 minutes, then it's a little bit different. I do want to point out that in the beginning, if you look at the numbers, a lot of people died. A lot of people died, you know, in China and large parts of the world. And there's a speculation, I want to say it's more than speculation. There's some literature that commented that maybe viral load, there's a concept called viral load. How much of the virus you were exposed to, that also plays a role in how sick you get. So if you have one virus molecule or particle versus 100, you know, that plays a role on how sick you get. So if you look at these things, masks by itself will not solve the problem. Distance by itself will not solve the problem. Time by itself will not solve the problem. Hand sanitization by itself will not solve the problem. But when you put all three, four of these things together, then what you're doing is you're really minimizing the viral load that a person is exposed to. And that's what, in my opinion, allows people to have these low-grade symptoms, or maybe they're asymptomatic, that they have the disease but they have no idea they have the disease, is because with the good habits, we allowed people that whoever did get exposed, their viral load wasn't too much. So their own immune system was able to overcome it. Maybe they had a little bit of fever, maybe they had a little bit of muscle aches or a little bit of a cough. But that is what we want to see. Nothing is going to be perfect, but we just want to do something so that we know that, you know, we can't stay isolated forever. Life has to go on. We need, you know, our mental health is just as important as our physical health, you know. So we what we want to see is that everything stays manageable. Nothing's going to be perfect, but if we do something, if we do just a little bit, then hopefully whoever does get it, it'll be very low grade, they'll be very manageable, they won't get critically ill, and that's what we're hoping for, and the whole system, you know, won't crash and burn at once. Are there any questions that I could address, or?
I have one question. At our last board meeting, there was a discussion about what age is appropriate to wear a mask. It was brought up at our board meeting that maybe our primary elementary kids, it wasn't even appropriate or proper, or they couldn't wear it correctly. So what age are they seeing now is probably appropriate for kids to wear a mask? Because I think Governor Nolan had a study that there was an age cutoff that it doesn't look good for that age to wear a mask.
I can't quote any studies. I can just share my thoughts. I don't know how much, how accurate this would be. What did that study show?
I don't know, one board member brought up the study, I don't remember who did.
Okay. I'm just using my kids, for example. So I have a 7-year-old, I think she can wear it. Then I have a 4-year-old, I think, like fortunately, I've created enough of a culture, you know, within my household that, you know, coronavirus, that he would be able to do it. Then I have a 2-year-old, he probably can't, but then again, he wouldn't go to school. I think if it were up to me, I would ask everybody, so this type of attitude that, oh, this study shows that it cannot work, it absolutely, I go back to my other, you know, philosophy of practicing medicine, and, you know, don't be too smart, don't be too smart, because today one study will show this, tomorrow another study will show something else. Don't be too smart, try to just cover your bases. I would ask everybody just be creative, try to make it fun, try to make it encouraging. I was driving down the interstate in Chicago, and they had many billboards saying that there's a mask for every occasion. And then it occurred to me, maybe, to get my kids to be on board, I can buy all sorts of different fun masks, and then, this one will match this outfit, this one will match that outfit, this is more of a formal thing, this is more of a fun thing. And I could certainly see my son keeping like a Spider-Man mask on, or, something like that. So I would encourage everyone to be kind of creative and look for fun ways to try to get them. And we already know that it's not going to be perfect. Will it help them, will it make them touch their face and their mouth and their nose more? Maybe, probably, but I don't know if it's going to work against us. Fortunately, if you look at the numbers, there aren't too many cases of the really young. Fortunately, like the really young don't seem to, at least they don't seem to get critically ill statistically. If you look at all the age, the distribution of the age, the people who died, the people who are hospitalized, and things like that. So I don't know how long coronavirus will go on. If this goes on for a few years, hopefully not, but even a year, I think, my opinion, I could be wrong, is that building the habit, they might not be perfect today, but maybe in a month, maybe in a few months, they'll be a little bit better. And I would also argue that even if there was no coronavirus, the habit of being conscious of touching your mouth, touching your face, that's a good habit to have. That's a good awareness to have anyways. And if I could instill that in my kids personally, that would be great. Those are my thoughts on that.
So you would see an issue with our kindergarten students, they're 5, a 5-year-old on up wearing, being able to wear a mask?
I would try it. I wouldn't say no. I would try it knowing that it probably won't work, but I wouldn't say no. I wouldn't say don't do it. I'm not a fan of that, thought process, or, I would try it knowing that they're not going to do it perfectly, and that's okay.
I have a question, and it's not necessarily along the same lines of that. We've talked a lot about, and I think the perception of a lot of people is, there's a fair number of people that aren't showing any, they might have it, they're not showing symptoms, they're asymptomatic. You kind of touched on some of the people that are getting it really aren't showing severe symptoms, at least at this point in time. And obviously, here in the school building, I think we're more concerned about the students being carriers and potentially giving it to another vulnerable population. In our circumstances here, staff, or potentially taking it home to parents, or having it end up jumping into the community because we've taken it from our building somewhere else. But can you speak at all to maybe some of the people that are asymptomatic and aren't exhibiting severe symptoms? Is there much out there as far as what the long-term repercussions can be for people, even if maybe they're not experiencing much right now? Or is that still kind of a lot of uncertainty as far as that goes?
To the best of my understanding, COVID-19 is a strain of coronavirus, and coronavirus itself isn't new. So I would imagine that a lot of the similar long-term, sequela or the long-term consequences or effects of COVID-19 would be similar to just, other respiratory related illnesses or the coronavirus family. There are some, viruses that are known to have such and such side effects, such as neurologic side effects, such as heart side effects, such as maybe lung side effects or spleen side effects. To my understanding, if you are asymptomatic, then I think that risk is less for the person. So I don't know, and I don't, everything I'm telling you is per my understanding. There could be some data out there that speaks against this. I wouldn't be so worried about the long-term effects of an asymptomatic, young, healthy person. We do see it a lot that people who are more vulnerable, that they have, that the residual effects linger for maybe years, or maybe they never, quite bounce back. You see it a lot for elderly people. Their functional status will be here, and then they'll be hit with something, whether it's a really bad pneumonia or something, and then their functional status drops. It's a very slow process to climb up, and a lot of times they never quite reach their former functional status. That's something that you see all the time. But for the young, healthy person who's asymptomatic, to my knowledge, I don't know if we need to be worried about long-term effects. Then again, it hasn't been here long enough to even know what long-term effects, there's going to be.
So still just kind of thinking more of the kid, obviously we want to be cautious for the kids we have in our building, because it only takes one case or one situation to have everything go, really bad. But, again, more worried about, the age of the majority of the people in our community, and, trying to limit our ability to take it outside of the building and potentially bring it somewhere else.
And it is my opinion that no matter what we do, it's gonna come in. Maybe it's already here, but I really do believe that it won't blow up exponentially if we just, do the best that we can. Maybe someone does get it, but if somebody practices good habits at home, somebody practices good habits, going to the gas station, and good habits at work, then even if they did have it, hopefully with all these barriers that we're putting, we're trying to keep it contained on a micro level.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have a question, and kind of I just want to ask the doctor this mostly, I think, and if it's too tough, just go ahead and say pass, and I won't hold any judgment, but you kind of touched on it. You said you were excited because you wanted to tell your kids one day. And so my question would be, at what point, are we to, at what point does this end to the point of, no more masks, no more fear of the coronavirus? Is it possible, I know I did talk about, a vaccine, and I've read, I think, did it take 27 years for, the polio vaccine, or, so, I think it's funny that they think they're gonna have one in 6 months. But, what is what is, maybe your understanding of how long this could go, maybe forever?
And this is me just sharing my.
Yeah, that's.
If I had to pick a number, I would say 18 months.
Okay.
Having said that, over the past 6 months, I've personally seen how the country can stop just like that. Today it's coronavirus, tomorrow it's looting.
Right.
So holding your breath that okay, when this magic thing happens, everything will be fine or perfect again. I'm trying to accept internally that fine is fine until something else happens. So I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic that hopefully by the 18-month mark, you know, we would have a handle on things, whether it's a vaccine, whether enough people already had it and gotten immune to it. At the same time, you know, I'm having the realistic thoughts in the back of my mind that something else could come up, you know, something else, whether it's a biologic agent, whether it's a political thing, whether it's a social, you know.
Right.
So,
Well, I was at a business in town today, and I heard two older people say, they're talking about it, and one of them said, well, when do you think this will end? And the other said, well, in a couple months after the election. But I don't think that's actually true. Kind of. But, yeah, my question was maybe more, yeah, you answered, like, when does it become the flu, and it's just, you know, it's like the flu does kill a bunch of people, and we maybe wrongly not had this response, but, you know what I mean, like,
yeah, and initially I tried to, try to compare the numbers of like influenza versus coronavirus, and we just don't have accurate data for coronavirus to accurately compare it to the flu. Like the flu has a, I forgot what the actual numbers are, but let's just pretend it's a 3% mortality rate, whereas coronavirus is, you know, 30% mortality rate. But is it because the only people that we tested were the ones who were super sick anyways, who are, you know, on their way of, you know, getting complicated, or, so I don't know if we quite have it. For flu, from a medical side, if somebody has influenza, then our treatment, like we know what to do. You know, you give, if they're having trouble breathing, shortness of breath, you give, you know, certain medicine, steroids, oxygen, you know, positive pressure ventilation, this, that. That same formula didn't necessarily work with COVID. That's the case. So initially, we didn't know how to treat it. You know, like the presentation was a little different. Usually with influenza, they're having trouble breathing, they're wheezing, they're not moving air. For coronavirus, somebody would say, I feel a little short of breath, and their oxygen saturation would be in the 70s, which is unheard of. And we're like, really? And their oxygen requirements, I kid you not, at Sioux Falls or all the major hospitals, they're requiring 50 to 70 liters per minute of oxygen. If we were to do that here at our facility, we'd finish all of our oxygen within 24 hours. You know, like the preparations that we had to take at our facility for like figuring out an oxygen solution, okay, what, you know, but yeah, so comparing it to influenza, one of the reasons why we're having a higher respect for it is because the standard treatments of what we would normally do in somebody with respiratory failure is, it didn't work, you know, it didn't work. So we learned a few things. We learned about a few treatments that, okay, for coronavirus, if you flip them over, if you make them lay on their stomach, then for some reason their oxygenation improves, you know, so you can prolong intubation, which is putting the tube down their throat. You can actually prolong or delay intubation for several days if they're able to tolerate, you know, being on their stomach. When you intubate them, it's almost like a 10-day ordeal on getting them off the ventilator, extubating them. Usually for the influenza, we give, you know, neb treatments and steroids, but you don't give them. In the beginning, we thought that with COVID-19, the nebs and the steroids were counterproductive. Just the pathophysiology or the mechanism of what was happening with the body, like the standard treatments weren't working, which is, I guess, why we had a larger respect for coronavirus.
Two questions.
Sure.
So it looks like our fall activities plan calls for masks being worn both inside and outside. I can see the validity to the argument of wearing masks inside as far as spectators go. But outside, I mean, are there a lot of verifiable cases of this being passed from person to person while outdoors, while socially distancing?
I could be wrong. I would go back to the concept once again of like, don't try to be too smart. The benefits, let me back up. I agree with you. I personally think that the risk is much less outside. You know, there's a lot more ventilation, it's much easier to space out. I don't think it's is as essential. The benefits of wearing a mask outside is once again to develop the habit, the awareness, the reminder that there's something there. Whether it, you know, will filter out respiratory droplets the way that it does inside, or that you're more worried about of it happening inside, probably less of an issue. Those are just my thoughts on it, that if it were up to me, I wouldn't say you don't have to, like, if that makes sense. I wouldn't say you don't have to.
Am I understanding you that it doesn't really help to wear it outside? The only benefit is that you get used to wearing a mask all the time.
I don't want to say it doesn't help, because I don't know if it doesn't help.
But you don't know if it does. Outdoors. Indoors, I'm not gonna argue with you on that one. I think the science is pretty clear.
Right.
But outdoors, I'm having a hard time swallowing this pill. And without some science to back it up, I can't back it up.
Yeah. And I don't know if there are any studies. I don't know if there's any science out there. If there is any, then, you know, then by all means, you know, follow those recommendations. Yeah, when I'm outside, me personally, when I'm outside, when I'm walking to and from work, then in the beginning, I used to take my mask off and just keep it off, like, okay, I'm outside, no one's around me. But then I started to realize how much I touch my face, I touch my eyes, and you know, all you need, and this is just my thoughts, you know, I could be wrong. All you need is to touch one doorknob, you know, that had it, and you touch your eye, and that's it, you know, you're done. Or you could have been exposed. And I personally, in a crowd, for my kids, my family, I would say, I would encourage them to wear it. Can I prove that it helps in terms of infection transmission? No. I don't know if the studies are there. I do believe that there are other benefits besides just the infection transmission.
What if you could socially distance outside?
Like I said, you know, no one thing will solve it. What we're trying to do, we do the best we can, knowing that we can't do it perfectly. But if we do enough things, then we're optimizing our ability to minimize the risk. And we know that it's not going to be perfect, and that's just the reality. You can't be perfect.
Well, and I think we should point out in here too, that we're just recommending that people wear masks in those situations. There's no mask requirement that's in that plan.
Okay, the way it was worded, I felt like it was more than just recommendation, but.
I mean, it does say highly recommended, but, I mean, I'll tell you, as far as today goes at school, we were highly recommending and encouraging people to wear masks in the building. And I mean, quite frankly, I guess I was a little disappointed at the number of people that actually did. You know, but I mean, to be honest with you, I kind of anticipated that being the case, because I think if you're not actually gonna come out and say, you know, we're gonna have to wear a mask in this situation, I mean, any normal kid is just gonna, well, why would I do it then, you know? And I think if we get to a point where we would ask them and say, you know what, in this situation, we think it's in everybody's best interest to wear one, I really don't know that we're gonna get a ton of pushback, as long as we're, like we talked about at the last meeting, we're finding opportunities to give them breaks so they're not having to go 4 or 5 hours consecutively without getting a break from it. I know Jane, Christy, Will today, I mean, when we were out in the hallways and stuff, we had them on, but it was also kind of nice to, when you had a chance to get back to your office just for 2 or 3 minutes, just to be able to take it off a little bit so you can kind of refresh yourself. I mean, it's not ideal by any stretch of the imagination, and we talked about that last week. But,
That's my mistake then for not reading it correctly, because I was under the assumption that it was more than just a suggestion, so.
but we thought, you know, as far as that situation, that scenario, you know, during the school day, I mean, there's things in place where we as a school can say, you know, you're gonna wear a mask, and, you know, that we kind of have the authority to do that. When it comes to games at home, I think that becomes a lot more difficult, because, you know, say you come into the game and we say we're gonna mandate masks, and you basically look at me and say, I'm not wearing a mask, and you can't make me wear a mask.
Yes, nice.
Well, I could ask you nice, but you're still gonna look at me like, you know, and then we get into a situation where, you know, you go up and, or even you have one on, you go up in the stand, you take one off. So I go up there and say, Slade, you know, you're gonna need to put the mask on, and you just say, nope, I'm not doing it. And then we get into one of those situations where, am I supposed to, okay, well then you need to leave? Well, I'm not gonna leave. And then we, okay, well then, what do I do next? Do I have to call law enforcement and have you escorted from the building? Because, I mean, nobody wants to get into that situation.
Right.
So, and I think one of the things, and I'm not trying to jump the gun here if people have more questions for him, but what we talked a lot about collectively here was, whoever you decide to let in to home games, whether it's inside, outside, whatever, you probably better be prepared for them to do whatever they want to do, regardless of what you're asking them, because enforcement of that is just going to become a really difficult situation. So, that was kind of the thing that took us away from necessarily recommending that we just open it up and say, anybody that's ever come in the past can just come in and you can, you know, and there's no restrictions on it. I think that puts a lot of people in bad situations, and I also think it kind of makes things difficult here as far as what we're trying to do during the school day. So, you know, and we can talk a little bit more about that later. I don't want to jump the gun if people have more questions for Dr. Hafiz while he's here.
Still have my number 2 question.
Yeah, sorry.
Has to do with immunity. So I'm having a hard time keeping up on this, and maybe you can help enlighten me on it. But if you have a strain of COVID, are you immune from that strain going forward? Are there other strains? You know, I've heard there's 4 strains going around the United States right now. Let's say I get one strain. Am I immune from that one strain for a year? Am I not immune from it at all? Am I immune from all 4? How does that work once somebody has gotten it?
The best of my knowledge from the latest information is we don't know the answer.
Okay, yeah. Everything coming out all the time is contradictory and changing.
Right.
So yeah, I didn't know if anything had been updated.
My answer is,
we don't know.
just don't get it.
Fair enough.
Can you talk about surface spread?
Yeah, at least early on, the thought process was that on organic surfaces, we're looking at 24 hours. If it's like a stainless steel or like a non-porous surface, then 72 hours. I think that's what they said early on, and I have not come across any changes to that.
Another thing, obviously that kids don't have the effects that older adults do. Where is kind of the range where a person needs to be concerned with age? I think there's kind of a balance, because I think we are called to give, you know, quality education. And I think also in sports, it kind of goes hand in hand maybe a little bit, where there's people that are willing to take risks to a certain point, and that's why there's probably an ambulance sitting outside of football on Friday nights, and then there's, you know, a physical trainer ready to go and so forth. So there's kind of this risk and reward, but where does it become, you know, too risky at a certain age that we have to say, okay, we need to protect this age and beyond?
Specifically for COVID?
Yeah.
As far as a hard number for age, the South Dakota Department of Health websites, they divided by the age demographics. The lowest numbers that I've seen that either were hospitalized or were deceased, I don't think deceased, but hospitalized or active cases, they started at 20 to 29. So I didn't come across any hard numbers about a threshold for, you know, 60, under 12 or, you know, 13 or over. Having said that, I just want to remind all of us that these are just general rules, but every case is different. You know, if somebody has really bad asthma, for example, then you know that if he or she were to get a respiratory illness, then it'll affect them much more than somebody who doesn't have asthma. So those special populations, someone with a compromised immune system, somebody who's, if they have a metabolic disorder or a genetic disorder, Down syndrome, there's things like that, then, these special populations, I'll just be a little bit more vigilant. In every case is different, but as a general trend, we're seeing that the young kids usually don't get as critically ill as the older people.
That's kind of the hard part, I think, to analyze. How normal do we keep things? And if the kids are not experiencing the symptoms like that, are we really protecting others, like their parents or their grandparents? And if so, are we needing to educate more beyond our school? And so that's kind of like, how do you keep things normal? But who are we protecting is kind of my two thoughts that I'm having. Maybe there's not an exact answer to it.
There is an unspoken, I didn't say this, okay? There's
Kill the camera.
Welcome to the school board.
No, sometimes if in medicine, if you follow every single thing, every single thing, then even Tylenol will kill you. So in the rules, there's sometimes an attitude of don't ask too many questions. Don't ask too many questions. This person, he feels good. Is he an asymptomatic carrier? Can he do this? Oh, he touched this. Does he have any symptoms? No. So don't ask any more questions. Because there's no end. There's no end to it. So, and it's an accepted practice. And that's where we find that middle ground. That we have the hard symptoms. Loss of, new onset loss of smell. The nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, trouble breathing. Cough, fevers, things like that. If you say, oh, I have ear pain, can it be COVID? Yeah, sure. Part of the ear is part of the respiratory tract. COVID is a respiratory virus. But is it one of these 7 things? No. Then don't dig too much. And so there's this. That's how we balance, find the middle ground.
When another thing is you be vigilant with testing, whereas if there's questions, or if I've been around somebody that has had it, if you test, is it pretty high confidence level that I can go back to normal, or is there an onset period where, well, I was around somebody that had it, so I need to, test at this point?
Yeah. And this is a very good question, because if you look at the guidelines from Avera and you say, I had exposure to somebody who was confirmed COVID-19, but I don't have any symptoms, what do I do? It's gonna say something like, you're healthy, you're under 65, you don't have chronic medical conditions, and you're asymptomatic. You don't meet criteria for testing, but you should self-isolate for 10 to 14 days. So if you look at this and you realize how cumbersome this world is, it is far easier to just wear a mask and stay 1 more feet away, so that it's not even an issue. Sure. Because here we are, we're finding these guys, well, can I come back to work? I need this note for work, and the CDC says self-isolate for 14 days. And sometimes even a negative isn't a real negative, unless it's negative 3 times, within 10 days. You realize that for society to go on, if you were to follow every letter, every rule to the T, society would just stop. It is far easier to just sanitize your hands and just stay an extra 2 feet away, so it's not, you're not even in the gray zone of which direction to go.
And I think to piggyback off that a little bit, we've talked about, like I brought up tonight a little bit, obviously we're concerned, well, maybe go back for a second here. as far as, worrying about one population more than the other, I think our goal here and what we're trying to do is we're trying to protect as many people as we possibly can. Obviously, there's some science to what you're saying about the kids maybe not getting as sick as others, but that certainly doesn't mean they're not capable of taking it somewhere else. So, regardless of the population that you're looking at one way or the other, I guess in my mind, and correct me if I'm wrong here, it really doesn't probably change your approach a whole lot. So if we're worried about, if we're most concerned about the elderly population in the community, that probably doesn't change our approach here a whole lot any more than it would if we were concerned about the kids themselves being the population that would be at the highest risk. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because the precautions are the same.
What's your feeling on when it starts to get cold out? I think this will ramp up, kind of like influenza does, when it gets cold out, Matt, or, we need to start taking more precautions when it does get cold.
I don't know what the scientific community has concluded about how coronavirus, COVID-19 will behave when it's cold. In the clinic and in the medical centers, we are actively trying to look at our current flow, and we're anticipating that things might get worse. We're preparing as if it'll get worse. One of the thought processes about the respiratory illnesses being more frequent, being more prevalent in the winter months is that people are closer together in indoor spaces. I don't quote me on this, but I also believe that there are more secretions, respiratory secretions that are a little bit more prevalent, that are not necessarily infectious. Like you can have an irritation type inflammation. So such as cold air, for example, very cold air, it'll give you a runny nose for a little bit. And that, if you are an asymptomatic carrier and you just have a runnier nose even for half an hour, then you're going to be wiping and spreading things a little bit more. So I think that also plays a role in transmission of some of these infectious stuff. But I am not aware yet of if they figured out how it's going to behave, and we're just kind of preparing for the worst. You guys have a hard job. My job is easy. I just want to make it clear that I have a lot of respect for you guys, and I'm glad that I'm not in your position.
Any other questions? Thank you, Dr. Ortiz.
You're welcome.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Matt.
thank you. You're welcome.
It's up to you. I mean, we're just gonna talk a little bit more about this activity.
If you want to, you can put
You get one free school board vote with every speech, so obviously.
So we're short of number tonight, but you can be on board.
We'll just work it out a story.
Sure. And to kind of preface our conversation about this, every school that I've talked to is kind of all over the board as far as what they're gonna do with some of this stuff, ranging from, we're just gonna let everybody in, to, we might say parents only into the game, and we're not gonna do student body or anything like that. So a lot of what we tried to think about is making this community specific to what we're trying to do as far as protecting our own community and kind of where we're at as far as some of this stuff goes. I will tell you that the whole voucher idea for the volleyball stuff puts a lot more work on her for having to get that stuff out to other schools and so on and so forth. One of the things that did bother me a little bit with some of the guidelines and the recommendations that the Activities Association came out with is they're telling us that whatever we decide to do for our fans, we should extend that same courtesy to visiting fans and visiting schools, which in my mind seems to be a little counterproductive as far as what you're trying to do. You know, we know what's going on in our community, or at least, I guess we're never gonna 100% know. We have a better idea of what's going on in our school, what's going on in our community. We start bringing in other towns and parents and all that stuff. I just think it gets a little more complicated as far as that stuff goes. Now, could you just come out and say, you know, we already said we're gonna try to, basically we're gonna stream everything for free, whether it's in the gym or out of the thing, so people are gonna have an opportunity to look at that. You know, do you consider, you know, if not initially, at some point in time, we're only gonna allow our own people in the games? Is it gonna rub people the wrong way? Maybe, but are we really, is that what we're really that concerned about right now? You know, I mean, I don't know, and we've talked about too, you know, if we wanted to be as safe as we possibly could, we would say, we're just gonna play the game, we're not gonna have anybody come in at all. Now, obviously, all of us know how well that idea would go over. So we thought that this was at least a way to kind of compromise a little bit as far as each kid still has the opportunity to have people in the stands supporting them, but we can also kind of be responsible in making sure that maybe some of the other people that, and I know this is gonna sound bad, but I'm gonna say it anyway, that maybe wouldn't make the appropriate choice for them, don't actually come into the building, or we at least limit the number of people that would do that. So, you know, as far as outdoor activities, you know, just kind of rolling with those right away as far as they are outdoors. We're hoping that people are responsible enough to try to space themselves out and do some of the things that Dr. Hafiz talked about, so we don't have to be as restrictive in those particular situations. So, is it kind of like we talked about last week, is it perfect? No, but I don't really know what would be either, so.
I think a lot of that's gonna self-regulate too. I know we had a library board meeting last night, and since the library's opened back up, the numbers are less than half of what they were pre-COVID. You know, we were worried about having too many people in the building at one time and being able to socially distance. It hasn't been a problem because people still aren't willing to really go out. Same thing, Friend in Sioux Falls has a restaurant. Numbers are half. You know, they're open, same hours as before. People just aren't as willing to go out and put themselves at risk in that environment. I think it's gonna be the same with sporting events. I just don't see us having the same size crowds as we did before. I think it is gonna be easier to spread out just from that alone, but we'll see.
As far as the volleyball thing, like reading the volleyball thing, like, not that I'm totally opposed to doing this, but things like the 4 voucher thing, I worry more like causing family problems, like separated families, like mom and dad each get one, grandma and grandpas don't get to come, like kids playing a senior, you know, the kid playing their senior year only has 8 more football games. You know, I don't even know what the numbers are, but it's probably like 97% of the kids that play sports don't go to college, don't go on to college, and you know, so like I kind of want a little bit of it to be like people to have their own choice to say, you know, like, oh, whatever, I'm going to live my life, and I know we want to protect ourselves. So I don't know exactly how I feel on that, but further down, like, it gets to, like, the school board, the district would allow staff members, board members, and their spouses to come to the event. And I kind of think of it this way, is if our goal is to do as much in the school as we possibly can, why would we allow the school board members to come, or any staff member that doesn't have a kid, or more than what we would need to run the door? So if, for instance, like Kevin is in charge for the night, or Christy is in charge for the night, like, and now it would stink for you, but like, you're in charge of a little bit more, keeping more staff members at home, and maybe even to the point of like, custodians can set everything up prior, not here, and so if a kid pukes, like, not that I would ever like to do this, but like, then it becomes your responsibility to keep the custodians and then to try and keep as many school staff out of the building while the people that potentially would be bringing in. Does that make sense?
And just, I think you're onto something there. Part of the reason that we included that in there is we looked at a lot of other schools' plans of what they were gonna do, and a lot of them had that particular clause in there. Now, if you would want to say that they, you know, you want to get rid of that, I would have zero problem with that. Because, I mean, like I said, if everything's gonna be streamed anyway, I don't think we would have a lot of staff members that would be upset, as far, or their spouses upset with, if we're gonna watch it, we're gonna watch it from home.
Right.
So, I mean,
And I thought about like the school board thing, like, Slade's got a daughter, Cody's got a daughter, Mark's got a daughter.
Right.
Well, realistically, why are Corey and I there? I mean, yeah, it's nice that they want to offer that, but like, that doesn't make sense to me. Like, this whole thing doesn't, I mean, like, well, obviously, I'm not on the side of the mask and stuff, I understand the reason, so like, if I'm gonna go that way, then like, to me, it's like, okay, then let's actually go that way. And so, but that being said, if everybody else is like, I wanna let all the fans in, like, I'm okay with that too. Like, that would be more my preference, but if we're not gonna go that way, then to me, that makes no sense. You know what I mean? Like,
Sure. I have just a comment to add about what you said about the extended families and letting people in and their parents want to come watch the kids, that we have to remember that sports are for the kids, they're not for the parents. And I feel like more parents would rather watch their kid on TV finish their basketball season at the state tournament than get 3 games in and we let all our fans in, we had to shut down 3 or 4 basketball games and that kid didn't get to play at all. So we have to keep that in mind, that it's not for the parents to come and watch their kid play, it's for the kid to actually get to play. That's more important.
Did you just make a guarantee that we're going to state this year?
Yes,
Is that what you just said?
exactly. So I mean, I'd rather go to state and watch, or watch it on TV than for us to get 3 games in. We had a positive case show up in our school because we had a bunch of people coming to the building, and then we canceled the next 4 or 5 games. You know what I mean? It's for the kids to play, it's not for us to come watch.
Right.
but there's
Do you
no,
have a kid
there's
that
no
plays sports
guarantee.
yet?
What's that?
Do you have a kid that
No,
plays sports
what?
yet?
I wouldn't.
Okay. That's,
But you know what
I
I mean?
would've
I
said
would
the
way
same
rather play
thing.
basketball when I was in high school than my parents show up for the game. So
I think most kids, when they start playing, they're like, they want mom and dad there. That's
my
the
parents
first
never
choice.
came to any of my games and I survived. So, I'd rather play than us get canceled because parents came to the game.
And I agree with that, but like, my counter would be that we could let nobody but the students in, and 3 games in. we
Right,
could
right.
Cancel the
That's
season
legit,
the
yes.
same. So, if it is important for people, I kind of do like the idea of them having the opportunity. And I understand it is also for the kids.
And on that first line, it says each roster participant. So I have 2 daughters in volleyball, I would get 8 vouchers.
I don't know that that would be the
Well,
case there.
I don't think it would be fair that I have 2 daughters in there, that I get 8 vouchers, and Slade only gets 4 vouchers.
And I've talked about this
I'll
with,
get way more than 4.
I've talked about this with other superintendents too. And this is where the concept of just saying parents only is actually a lot easier to administer. Because then you don't end up in a situation where, so we're gonna give you 4, and that covers you, your wife, and whoever else, in your family that you would wanna bring. Where maybe we say we're gonna give you 4, but in the past, you've had 10 people there from your family, whether it's immediate or extended, to watch the thing. And so that's where, like, you make a good point there, as far as, we thought 4 was reasonable as far as giving everybody the opportunity to, at least mom and dad would get to be there. Plus, in most situations, they would have a couple extra, as far as somebody else coming to the game. To try to eliminate or alleviate the problem altogether, I would say then your best bet would probably just say we're gonna stick to parents only. And you would make some exceptions for situations where maybe you have a split family, so, dad and stepmom and mom and stepdad, or something like that could go, so that, you cover that, but,
Christie, I know you're not gonna be happy with me saying this, but I know the vouchers are a pain in the butt, but I feel like we have to. Like, my in-laws come to every game, period. That's their thing, they come to show support. And if they were able to come to games, they would never let me hear the end of it. So, I know that vouchers are a lot of work.
Well,
I just think it's a necessary evil. I think
I
you need.
do too.
Yeah, so, appreciate you in that.
Well, and it covers the, the siblings even.
Right.
For the family. I get, each roster participant covers your manager, you know what I mean?
Sure.
And that's kind of what it is.
And actually, bringing a manager brings great question. Are we allowing water boys or girls at all this year, and if so, why?
We haven't really talked
Because those athletes get thirsty. Question about that.
I know, they're not quite in the NFL, I think they can still spread their own mouth. Yeah. But there again, like, I mean,
Here's why I think that's important to still have them included. There are some kids who aren't as athletically inclined, but can still be a part of the team by filling that role. So I would argue that it is still important for them to have that.
and I could agree, but are you drawing from the kids that volunteer to do it?
No, I'm gonna make Shane do that.
I mean, realistically, like, I mean, we're not showing favors to anybody, so why are
I mean, if
we?
you had to draw, yeah, you'd have to.
I mean, I understand if like last year, one of the mass girls did it, and it makes sense because her dad coached. Like, that makes sense to me. But like, on a regular year, but like on this year, if the option, you know, like,
Have we
your
ever
grade
had an
school kids can't come.
overabundance of water boy volunteers?
I've never had a complaint in my 28 years
Right.
about water boys and water.
Yeah, I don't think that's gonna be, I mean, maybe this year with everything being weird, it'll be different, I could be wrong, but.
For football, we have some of our junior high football boys that want to help do that.
Right.
I mean,
But
that's what we
they're
do.
also practicing with the.
Right, I mean, they're
So
basically
they're
part
around them
of
all the
the
time.
team each day, and, right, we've talked about how are we gonna do it differently this year with water during timeouts, and I think we have a plan and so forth, but yeah.
Kevin, we're not obligated to follow the High School Activity Association recommendation on allowing the other community into our building too, are we? Because to me, that's a bigger issue than.
The Activities Association recommendation says schools should extend the
It
same
doesn't say.
privileges to opposing thing, but, you know.
I just think we know what's going on in our
I'll
community.
go back here for
We
a
don't in
second.
These other.
Last spring, when the governors came out, or the governor came out and said, at least initially, all schools in South Dakota should close for the upcoming week. That was left pretty open-ended to some people as far as you could or you couldn't. Well, what most people in the general public didn't know is that if you would have been the school that would have stayed open, you would have got a call from the governor's office telling you you need to close your school. So I don't know if the Activities Association, you know, we get into that. I could see that being
That might
one of
get
those
a little sticky.
situations
Yeah.
where we say we're only gonna allow Freeman fans into games, and we're not gonna allow visiting fans, regardless of whether we're streaming that to them or not. We're gonna get a call from Pierre that says, Kevin, if you're gonna let your own people in and this is what you're gonna do to let them in, you need to be doing the same thing for everybody else.
I just don't think we're obligated to those other towns.
I would agree, but my argument against doing it would be, if we were only allowing people that did everything in Freeman into the gym, like, then I could understand, but people go places. You know, so you're going, like, I go to Freeman, Marion, and Hurley every day on my job, so like, I've hit those 4 towns, you know what I mean, like, I wouldn't want to eliminate other schools.
And it was one of the things too, like my parents sometimes go to games away, and I think, is it Irene Wakanda? Who, they were walking in, they said, well, are you over 65? They said, well, yeah, well, then you're free. But we don't do that, but we do let senior citizens over 65 have an activity ticket for free. So, you know, it's not exact right now. So I would definitely be in favor of the, you know, 4 tickets for visitors or whatever, but I think for us, I think there might be some large families or some circumstances. So if we would even want to tailor it more towards families, I'd sure be in favor of that. I just had somebody that approached me before the meeting and says, my parents, which would be grandparents, come to every game and they're willing to, you know, do whatever, but they want to be there. And so I don't know if we just leave it open-ended with so many tickets based on family size or whatever, but, and then let them make the call. But I think we probably can tailor it a little bit more on our side than we can for visitors.
Well, the only problem with that is the Activity Association is gonna tell you that if you're gonna go through and you're gonna say, well, this kid on my team wants 7 tickets and this team on the, you know, so then they're gonna tell you, well, you're gonna need to do the same thing for the other team then. So each kid on that team is gonna have to go through and tell you how many tickets they want. What they're trying to get away from is this situation for these people and this situation here. Now, I kind of oversimplified a little bit and said, if we're gonna do this for our people, we're gonna do nothing for them, but they're gonna view it the same way. So, we had a conference meeting last week where we were hoping to try to sort some of this stuff out, and everybody just decided they were gonna kind of go their own way. Some of the schools are taking the approach that we're gonna let anybody in, and we're just gonna put something out there that says, well, you need to understand the risks, and if you wanna come, you come, but you come at your own risk, and blah, 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 blah. And I guess personally, my thought there is that's irresponsible on the part of the school district to put people in that situation, where you're basically just washing your hands of it, no pun intended. But saying, you know what, there's a risk here, but as a school, we're not gonna do anything to try to mitigate that risk in our community. We're just gonna throw our hands up and say, well, we know there's a risk, but we just hope people make the right decision. Come if you want. And you just end up with people in those situations where they probably shouldn't be there. And everything that you would read would say they shouldn't be there, but they're gonna come anyway, because they're gonna make the choice, whatever their decision-making process is at that point in time. Well, I just don't care anymore because I'm 75 years old and I've, done whatever. That just, I don't know, that concept just kind of bothers me. It bothered me that night when they brought it up too. You'd like to give people the benefit. I think they're gonna make the responsible decision and some of that stuff, and a lot of people do. But I just think when you're dealing with something like this, that has the potential to really knock down a specific portion of your population, that we gotta try to be responsible. We're gonna have to make some tough decisions for people that maybe some of them aren't gonna be real fond of, but, like I said, we're providing opportunities for them to get to see the game one way or the other. So.
I was gonna just share my thoughts about the number of participants in the indoor thing. One thing you could do, and I don't know if you guys already did this, is you could calculate the maximum number of spectators based on your space and say, like, if we were to space everyone out 6 feet apart, how many people could we accommodate? And then based on that, you reverse engineer your tickets or your vouchers to people.
The problem is people will.
No, but he's just saying, like, in general, like, in theory, if people were to abide by the.
Go by 30% of your capacity or something like that.
I believe the academy said they were gonna do parents only, and then they were gonna go 30% of whatever their capacity was.
Yeah, that's what, 2 tickets and then 30%.
2 tickets, that's what it was. 2 tickets for each participant, and then 30% what their capacity was.
So they would only.
First come, first serve then?
Well, and that's the problem we run into with that is, are we gonna have, and we kind of get in the situation like I explained with Slade and the mask, and then, are you gonna get to the situation where you say, like I'm at Walmart and I got the little clicker, and as soon as we hit that number, even if there's more of the visiting fans here than our own, that we're gonna lock the door. And that's where I think the whole, trying to decide, and I think Dr. Feast had a good idea, to kind of reverse engineer your numbers there and figure out how you're gonna do that one way or the other. Just then people know ahead of time, like, I'm gonna get into the game and, these are the expectations, so on and so forth. You don't have to worry about it. Well, my dad got off work late tonight and, maybe couldn't get there till the middle of the first volleyball match or something like that. But now he's stuck outside and can't come in because, they've already reached their capacity for what they were planning for, so.
I think Dr. Feast kept telling us to keep it simple. I think that was something he repeated it a lot.
That was a recurring theme.
It was his recurring theme was keep it simple, and I think 4 tickets is pretty simple.
No, I'm okay with the vouchers. I think it's a good idea. Might be in the minority on that one.
Well, and I will add to that. I know Will was there for one of them, or for the majority of one of them. We had some rather, I don't know what the best word is, pointed conversations maybe today with some of the kids about, there was some concern on some of that. Are we gonna get to a point where we're gonna maybe have to cancel some games or something like that? And I said, well, we don't really know what's gonna happen. But I think what we need to understand is, if everybody around here were to maybe take this a little more seriously, and I was talking, I think I was the senior class when I was there, you know, if we were collectively as this group in the room to maybe take this a little more seriously and start thinking about what we could do to try to prevent that from happening, you know, maybe we would be able to get a little bit further along before we, you know, have to start worrying about some of that stuff. So, and Dr. Fee said it at the very beginning. Very first thing I wrote down on my notes here is that we're in this together. And I think that's one of the things that we need to keep in mind here is a lot of this stuff is only gonna work if we can get everybody to do it. Or, you know, we're gonna be able to extend or prolong whatever we're gonna do here. And we can't, there's no way of saying with any certainty that we're gonna be able to avoid having to shut some things down at some point in time. We're hoping to avoid that. But I think those situations become a lot easier to avoid if we start, you know, trying to collectively emphasize, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this, because we think it's gonna help. And I know last week I said, and it was the last thing I closed with in that video I made this morning for the kids, is the school that is more, you know, the staff, the students, and the families that are more responsible both in and out of the school building are the ones that are gonna have the greater, you know, the more opportunities to get to experience a lot of these different things. So,
Dr. Fees, are there any, you know, obviously the medical industry is more geared towards being reactive and treating things that have happened. Is there anything we can do as a school proactively? You know, I've read, for instance, like 60% of people that get severe symptoms from COVID have a vitamin D deficiency. Could we increase something in the lunch line that is infused with vitamin D? Or, I mean, are there any proactive things that we could do to keep these kids, A, from getting it, and if they do get it, keep the symptoms at a minimum?
My first thoughts would be, if you want to optimize someone's intrinsic immunity, such as a vitamin deficiency or, you know, something like that, that'll take time to do. Like it'll be more of it'll be something like almost cultivating like a second nature or like a habit, you know. As a general rule, the healthier person, like from the ground up, will be optimized to fight off diseases. You know, somebody who minimizes the junk food, somebody who minimizes the processed food, somebody who gets enough physical activity, somebody with a healthy BMI, you know, all of that stuff. From a school standpoint, you know, is there anything that we could do? There are a lot of there's always a healthier alternative to encourage. I don't know if that would, you know, necessarily translate immediately that, you know, we'll see the attendance. An example is one thing that struck me strange, and I apologize if I didn't see the bigger picture, but I remember last year, one of the book fairs or one of the early morning, you know, when they have the book sales going on, and I came here and I brought my daughter. You know, we had to come here early to participate, and I saw that they were giving out donuts, and I couldn't understand that for the life of me. You know, I just couldn't understand, and I apologize if it was just like a special thing and you know, donuts, but you know, I would never give my child a donut for school. You know, her job is to be here, to focus, to pay attention, to learn, and you're gonna be loaded up on things that are nutritional, so that, you know, you're gonna be full, you're gonna have the energy and the focus to pay attention to whatever the teacher tells you. I would never give her a donut, you know, before school. So that kind of blew my mind at that time. Now, granted, if you wanted to start giving apples, you know, or something else on that day, which I encourage that you should do, but you know, will that guarantee that it'll translate, you know, very quickly to the overall health? I can't guarantee that. If you want quick things or simple things, it would be having the hand sanitizers, you know, readily accessible and repetitively building the habit of, you know, as you walk down the hall, hand sanitizer, okay, take a squirt, and just kind of finding creative ways to to make it enjoyable to have with hygiene. That's the most obvious thing that I could think of. If you wanted to start handing out, like a multivitamin, like for free, like a gummy chewable multivitamin, that's never a bad idea. I don't know what the policy would be.
Right.
I give my kids, multivitamins and stuff.
I know it's weird and a little bit out of the box, but we're in kind of an out of the box time period right now,
Right,
so
right.
I don't think it'd be a bad idea either.
Right.
It's not everybody's getting a multivitamin.
Sure. Yeah.
So why not optimize the amount
Yeah.
of healthy students we have?
Great.
So are we okay with removing that about the staff members and the spouses and all that stuff?
Just a second, we can come
The
in.
fourth bullet, remove that.
I would personally be in favor of that. Yeah.
Agreed.
And to that, I would encourage is, you think you need 2 people to administrate the game or whatever, then, but limit that number, no more.
One question I did have, okay, no, and that makes sense. One question I did have too is, would you be okay with, for home volleyball matches, us eliminating admission for the fall volleyball season? Just saying, you're gonna get your 4 vouchers or whatever, you come to the game, you turn your voucher and you're in. We're not gonna worry about money exchanging hands in that situation.
You're saying for football and other outdoor ones?
Well, and I wouldn't
Even-
even, I wouldn't even make the argument that what did we talk about the one time? In a given year for admission, as far as the actual number that we bring in, I don't even know if it's enough to actually pay our officials. I'm just thinking of trying to find staff members that are gonna feel comfortable, and obviously, if you're coming in with your voucher, somebody's gonna have to collect that voucher. We're talking about in here, if you're a kid coming in, you're gonna have to have some type of student ID. It's easy enough to get out the old ticket booth that has the plexiglass and all that stuff on it. Have somebody sit in there, they show them their ID, or they just, slide their ticket under the thing and, the person got gloves on or whatever it is. But we don't have that exchange of money going on at the doors and some of that stuff. We're still planning on doing concession stands, so you're still gonna have some of that stuff going on. I don't know, it was just kind of one of the things where we just thought, rather than trying to put a staff member in that situation, especially if we don't really pay additional money for ticket takers and some of that stuff. At least for the fall season, we'd be okay with waiving admission and stuff.
Maybe with the economy the way it is, maybe that wouldn't be a bad way to go. Thank you to the community.
So I personally, I guess I'm not opposed to it, but I just looked this up, and this is from the Freeman Courier. This is
So
their
fiction.
numbers.
It's fiction.
Very possible it's fiction.
Oh, you're
Very
still here.
possible it's 100% true. part of me really struggles with making all these things, and I know it's to prevent it, but we're 6 months in, and we've got 134 cases in 3 counties. I don't, I don't know. To me, that just seems crazy. But
So
I
do
guess,
you think the numbers are gonna stay that way if we don't do stuff?
very possible. I think about in here, and like Kevin said something like we've got to do our part to do it, and I would actually make the comment that there's only 2 people in here that are actually doing their part, and it's Shane and Dr. Feast. Everybody else is talking about masks and not wearing them. Yeah, we want to wear them, but
But aren't we distanced enough away from each other?
I'm not 6 feet from Mark. You're probably not 6 feet from Christy.
Is there 8 feet?
Deb's not 6 feet from Shane. So my question, a little bit of my question is yeah, I'm fine with these masks, but then let's follow our rules. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to. That's part of the thing that frustrates with me is it's only convenient when it's convenient. I don't know. Anyway, I've announced it. I don't care.
So what's your point? Would you like to open it up is what you're saying?
Well, no, I'm not even saying necessarily open it up, but like not taking money, like you say, we're taking money here. I mean, like, so we're exchanging money, you know, like,
Okay.
I just.
I think even if we look at it from a non-germ standpoint, it might be a token of goodwill to the community with everything being as garbage as this year has been. So, yeah, if we have a 1-year moratorium on entrance fees into sporting events, I think this would be the year for it.
You're talking specifically volleyball though, just for now.
Well,
Or everything.
Well, I was just gonna say, well, why don't we focus on our fall sports right now, and we can cross that bridge, because I mean, by the time we get to basketball season, hopefully,
Yeah.
you know, and we get in there, we might have a completely different scenario. You know, maybe we'll go through this, and like Kyle said, maybe nothing will happen. You know, we'll give everybody the tickets, we'll go through that, and nothing will happen.
Mhm.
You know, and people can look over here at Kevin and say, well, I told you so, and my response to that would be, that's fantastic. I'm glad that is the case, because, you know, I'd hate to have it be the other way around where, you know, even if we try to do something one way or the other, and all of a sudden we get a couple weeks in and we end up canceling or doing all that stuff, I don't want to be the one that has to turn around and tell other people, I told you so, one of those types of things. So, but, you know, as far as concession stand go too, we did get some, you know, plexiglass barriers and stuff up around that stuff too, so, and we're gonna have some different procedures. But yes, I mean, I understand that we're still exchanging money in there, so maybe the better argument on my part would have been like you two were talking about to begin with, that, you know, yes, it probably benefits us from the standpoint of not exchanging money in, you know, that other situation, but also kind of a token of goodwill to the people, because, you know, everybody's been hit kind of hard by everything that's going on.
My thought is, I prefer to lean on the side of letting people make their choice. But, you know, if that is not possible, I would probably lean more towards six tickets. If maybe what you're saying, Slade, is that people are gonna be somewhat apprehensive to come anyway, we can always cut it down. Well, why cut it down so much? It's easier to cut it down. So I'm more on the side of let's start out a little bigger, and if it's too much, and then cut it. But so I thought 6 could cover a family, and maybe somebody else that wanted to come that the family knows. But that's just me.
Well, if we reverse engineer the numbers,
I was just thinking that,
where does that put us at?
I don't know, we'd have to do some math, right, and take a look at the gym and see where we're at, so. And then try to figure out based on how many rides.
And Doctor, would you reverse it in the sense where a family would sit together, and so you would count a family as one sitting area? Or would you count each person in the family as 6 feet between each one too?
I would count each individual person,
Okay.
understanding that people don't follow the rules perfectly.
Okay.
That's how I would do it.
Yeah, you have to count your student body. Right. Yeah.
You don't know what those numbers are gonna be.
Well, I guess you
Well, we could make it,
guesstimate.
yeah.
The first game's next week, right? Tuesday?
Next Tuesday.
Tuesday.
So we'll probably have to get to work on trying to figure that out tomorrow, because Mrs. Sage is gonna have to get
Or just
The vouchers.
vouchers
Get
mailed
them sent
off
to
to
Avon.
those
Yeah,
schools.
we wanna send them tomorrow, so.
That's just something you can shoot to us in an email, huh?
Yeah, it'll be a couple corrections here, and we'll kind of see.
Right. Perfect.
What are you going with 4, you going with 6, or?
We're gonna have to do
We
some
don't know.
math again to count where we're gonna be on some of that stuff. And I guess my thought on that would maybe be, you know, we have 4 as the number in here. Let's take a look at where we're at, and if we get to a point where it looks like by reverse doing, you know, that we're gonna end up having to cut that number down to like 2 or something, then maybe we just stick with the 4 that's on there.
Sure.
since that was the number we kind of talked about in the first place.
And I think you might be able to adjust the number of vouchers up once we get into things and see that maybe not as many people are coming to these events as we're used to.
I think it'll be interesting to see what happens next Tuesday.
Yep.
You know, even with that said, you know, if we're gonna give, you know, I don't know, we'd have to look at the rosters, you know, how many roster people we have. But say you even had 25 people, you know, that's potentially 100 fans for your home team, you know, plus your student, your 9-12 student body. Once we have a chance to get everybody in the gym and kind of see, you know, how much of your student body is actually planning on coming, you know, to what extent are kids actually using those vouchers, you'll have a better idea. You know, it's no different than today when we showed up, you know, during the actual school day, trying to look and see, and you know, there was a couple of things that we got to the end of the day and sat down like, okay, this is gonna be horrible. We gotta do something else, because that's just not gonna work. So, but, you know, you can plan, speculate all you want until you actually see it happen. Sometimes that's the only way you're gonna be able to figure that out.
I'm guessing there'll be a lot of adjustments as this year goes on, in every aspect.
If it does turn out that you have the ability to offer more than 4 tickets, when you go to the stores, they have like little X's on the store, like stand here, stand here, stand here. I think, and you guys, this is just a suggestion, you guys can see if it's even possible, if you think it's a good idea, but I think it would be a good thing to almost like put like an X, like where the seats would be, like, you know, 6 feet apart, just to give people an idea, like a visual cue, understanding that people probably won't follow it, but maybe you'll have 1 or 2 people who just get reminded. All we're trying to do is just remind people. People already know what to do, but, you know, you have a neutral person that'll go either way, you know, depending on what other people are doing or whatever reminders, you know, they're getting, so that's what we're trying to catch.
Other questions, concerns on that? Did we decide on the admission thing? Is there kind of consensus on what you want to do on that?
I was fine without it, but that was me.
I guess my opinion would be is if we're not gonna take concession, or admission, I don't think we should do concessions. I understand the token thing, but it's more so a germ thing, and so why pass terms here and we're not here and here, so that would be mine.
I don't think it was right that we started, we didn't have to do concessions.
And so that would be mine.
Classes might not like it.
BYOS, bring your own snacks. Oof, so you get in for free, but you can't buy anything once you're in. It's catch-22.
Well, we can certainly talk about that a bit more.
Is that gonna affect a lot of different fundraisers that, I mean,
I would assume that your concession numbers are probably gonna be down a little bit anyway.
yeah.
You know, with the exception, you know, here's the other catch-22 that I think about. So you're gonna, you know, essentially, we're gonna find some way to restrict to some degree, if we're gonna use vouchers for the inside volleyball. You know, and I guess my thought with the volleyball is, you know, we're only gonna have X number of people that are gonna be there, you know, based on the conditions. It's probably just easiest to just not charge admission, you know, call it goodwill, whatever you wanna do. Just, again, eliminating another situation where stuff is being exchanged. The other side of football, if you're not gonna restrict admission at all, is not charging admission, is that gonna put you in a situation where now all of a sudden you're gonna have way more people coming? You know, I mean, I don't know the answer to that, but that is something that, you know, had crossed our minds a little bit too when you start talking about that admission thing. Now, if you do get more people and you're running your concession stand, then whoever has the football concession stand is probably making out better than whoever has the volleyball concession stand, but.
guess when you think about it, probably the people that are gonna show, if their family, pretty much, they're gonna be the ones with activity tickets anyway.
Well, we haven't sold any activity tickets yet, have we either? So, I mean, we would put that on the back burner too and say, you know, don't spend your money on an activity ticket right now because, you know, and that's what, $60? $55, $60? So,
I guess our kids were good at football games though. Yes?
kind of depends. I mean, I look at this over your gate, whatever you pull in for volleyball games and football games. I mean, if you're to the point where you're relying on that money to keep your doors open, then there's probably bigger issues.
Well, and 99, I shouldn't say that, the opposing team, I guess that would be the case. Never mind, we retract that. I was gonna say, most of the people that go to the games are from the school district anyway, are already paying taxes to fund everything, but you are getting a, you know, probably half of that from other towns and counties, so it's not necessarily true.
What do we think, Press?
Okay, so here how about this? I think this would be the motion, how about that I will make? I would be in favor of just doing straight for vouchers, because I think when you break down the numbers, I don't think you're gonna have less than that anyway, so I think you can go straight to that. With 86 foot by 24 foot, base 6 foot, that's like 50 some people anyway, so I think we're gonna be way less than your.
And we could adjust it if that turns out.
So I would say let's just go with the straight four. I would eliminate the fourth bullet. And then I would be fine with no admission, but then I would think for volleyball, let's not do a concession stand. How about that, if I make that motion?
I think the motion on there is just to acknowledge that we reviewed it.
Okay. So,
And that's why we're asking for, kind of asking.
okay, so then that would be my recommendation. How about this? That is my then recommendation.
So we wanna get rid of the third bullet there where we said staff members, board members.
The fourth
and
one.
stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if we're doing it for
Well, I was looking at
safety,
middle school, then, I'll say.
Yeah.
yeah, if we're doing it for safety, I'd say them very minimal staff, the bare bones to do whatever, if we're not, and same thing, if we have to have somebody watch concession stand, let's just eliminate that. That would be my recommendation. And outside, I guess it's outside, so we can make that work for, as far as football goes. I don't know if everybody would agree with that, but that would be whatever. And if everybody else wants to go a different way, then I'm fine with that.
So we're pretty much setting it for the fall only. We're gonna visit this again.
Yep.
For the winter sports.
I think that's pretty much what every other school is gonna do too.
Okay.
Let's try to use this to get through the fall and then we'll go from there.
Sounds good.
I'm fine with that.
My caveat, if you wanna add it or not, is if there's room for up to 6. do it.
We'll take a look tomorrow and see what we
Okay.
can come up with.
Okay, then we need a motion to acknowledge that
So move.
we discussed this. Motion by Slade.
I'll second.
Cody will second it. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
We're not shopping concessions.
That
We are.
was my recommendation, but
We were just going after this, so is the concession thing in there?
no, but that was
You're adding that in.
that was my recommendation to add that in there.
Okay.
If you guys are okay with that.
I'd vote no on that if we're gonna chop concessions. I think there's a lot of grades that depend on that, so I would vote no, but that's okay. That's okay.
Are you guys okay with that?
3-1.
Sound good?
So are we chopping concessions for inside and outside?
Just inside.
Just inside.
Yeah, just inside.
Just plan on taking gate outside anyway, right?
We're making different rules.
So is that what we are gonna take 8 outside?
I thought that was,
Outside is just a different animal.
Okay.
I thought that was the talk, I guess, but, yeah.
Isn't it,
I think honestly, inside, if you're gonna think about chopping the concession stand, if you're not gonna take admission, then you should just charge admission for inside games, because I think that's gonna be a pain, not having the concession stand inside. I really do, and even if you're gonna be kind of watered down as far as some of the stuff you might sell in comparison to what you had in the past, I would like to do the free admission. To be honest with you, I think it's good for the volleyball and for the football, but, if the argument is, no admission, then no concession, one or the other, I guess I would rather charge admission and have the concession stand then, because I just think that's gonna be, some of those nights for some people that are here, particularly inside, gets to be pretty long, not having the opportunity to come on here and get something to snack on, or, at least a bag of pop, or whatever it happens to be. So, if we have to say that we're gonna take admission for the inside stuff, just so we can have a concession stand, I think we can. Like I said, my vote would be, we just say we're not gonna do admission at all. We don't have to worry about trying to find people to do that. Obviously in the concession stand and some of that stuff, you still have the exchange of money, but.
With a football coach, does that make it tricky at all?
You could.
Christie, what do you think?
I think if I visit another school at a game, I'm pretty disappointed if I can't buy something at the concession stand. Like if I go on the road.
I'm okay with taking your suggestion. I'm okay if we did free admission, but keep concessions. Like my thing with the admission wasn't really from a germ standpoint. So that issue for me wasn't valid. So yeah, I'm okay with doing concessions, but not charging at the door. But, are you guys wanting to charge admission still if we do concessions then too? Is that what's going on here?
I'm sounding like, I think, or I'm hearing that the staff taking might be more of the risk category. That's where we're probably avoiding the risk. Is that what you were
I just think
worried
we're gonna
about?
have, and maybe I'm wrong, I haven't posed that question to anybody, but I just think we're gonna have a hard time. If we're gonna have, however many number of people coming in, and if there's some of them are gonna be from opposing towns and all that stuff.
I asked for volunteers to help kind of screen the kids in the morning, and I got like 7 volunteers. So I can imagine someone taking tickets from other towns is not gonna be highly sought job, so it's gonna be hard to find people that want to do it. What's that?
You wouldn't want that door.
Right, it'll be tough.
We'd have to go back to using that ticket boost.
I just think we're looking at everything as safety, and so like, why is that the safety point that we're just not gonna?
I wasn't.
No, everything else is safety though. Everything we look at is all about safety, right? Masks and everything we've talked about is safety, and so if we're gonna do safety, and I know I've
We
been
did
down the
get picked plexiglass for the concession stands and high enough where people would be standing.
And if you do some concessions at different towns, it's more of a cafeteria line where you pick it up and then you pay at the end. So I could see where there could be some
That's what we
some
have, is
strategies.
one hole for the food and one hole for
There might be something like
And to kind of piggyback off of Dr. DeFee's idea, you could always, not that people are gonna follow, but put your X's on the floor and all that stuff as far as understanding the line.
Right, but Dr. Feast, how long did it stick on the surfaces? The germ?
Organic stuff, 24 hours, stainless steel, things like that, 72.
Unless you wanna get whatever, I don't care.
If I could just weigh in, preventing a surge from COVID, it's much, a surge from COVID, I don't think will happen because of the exchange of money. Like, it's gonna be your crowd, it's gonna be close proximity, it's gonna be, people, not keeping their distance, they're yelling and screaming, and, they're just too close for too long. Like, that's how, in my opinion, if I had to rank things, I think you're able to fairly reasonably control or minimize the risk for, you know, matter of, you know, wearing the masks, wearing your gloves, frequent hand sanitization, and even if you do get it, hopefully you're young enough, healthy enough that it'll affect you mildly, and hopefully you'll practice good social distancing with everyone else, that, you know, the spread will be, you know, minimized too. No matter what we do, it's not gonna be perfect, it's just optimized.
Need to take a run at it again?
That's fine, we can have concessions. No admission.
Okay.
Both inside and out, or you still want to charge admission?
Do the same inside. Not gonna have one way and one the other way. That's, if you
All right, then we just need a motion to adjourn.
Just one thought before we adjourn. The new air dryers. I don't know if there is any interest of somehow getting more of a public feel. I don't know, I would love to get either a possibility of opening it up sometime for people to come and share their concerns or listen in, or if we could somehow have communication by questions or something, but I don't know, there's been some people that say, well, I'd like to come and express some concerns or just be there. If there's that way we can work that way, I would really like that, but
So there's still the public input portion of a regular school board meeting. And like it says in the top, up here, if they get a hold of me, we'll find a way to, you know, whether they have to call in or, you know, whatever. We did do that question and answer Zoom session, was it 2 weeks ago today? Yeah, just on that particular thing too. So, you know, we're trying to provide opportunities for people to do that. But yeah, if there's people that feel like they need to speak on an agenda item or something that's on the agenda, I mean, all they gotta do is let me know.
okay.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion by Cody,
A second.
second by Mark. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Thank you, Doctor, for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Good luck with the school year and have a great evening.
We probably enjoyed everyone. Yeah, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Oh,
Oh,
see you, Doc, just gotta hit that. See you later.
Yeah, take care.
Let's see.